The sun was barely rising over the cliffs when Kale noticed the sky darken, not with clouds but with movement. At first he thought it was a storm, but the shadows grew larger and more defined. Massive wings, glinting in shades of silver and gold, sliced through the morning light. Kale froze. Dragons. Real dragons. He had read about them in old books and heard tales from wandering travelers, but he had never seen one in person. And now there were dozens of them circling above, their scales shimmering as they descended closer to the cliffs. Kale's heart raced as they landed with thundering impacts, sending small rocks tumbling down the cliffside. Dust rose around them, but there was no fear in their eyes, only purpose. The largest of the dragons, its scales a deep iridescent blue, stepped forward. Its eyes were intelligent and calm, but they seemed to pierce right through Kale. He felt a sudden, strange connection, as if the dragon was speaking directly to his mind. Human, the voice echoed, not through his ears but inside his thoughts. We need your help. Kale staggered backward, unsure if he had imagined it. His mouth opened but no words came out. The voice spoke again, this time gentler. Do not fear. We mean no harm. Our herd is sick and only your kind can help us. His mind reeled. Humans helping dragons? Impossible, yet here they were, asking him for aid. Kale noticed the other dragons watching him silently, their eyes filled with hope and worry. The blue-scaled dragon lowered its massive head closer, letting Kale see the scars along its snout and the weary look in its golden eyes. Kale swallowed hard. I don't know how I can help, he finally said. The words sounded small and foolish in front of these towering creatures. You have what we need, the dragon replied, its voice calm but urgent. A rare herb grows in your lands. It is the only cure for our illness. No dragon can reach it safely. Only you can. Kale's mind raced. The village elders had always warned against dragons. They said dragons were dangerous, unpredictable, and to be avoided at all costs. Yet here they were, standing before him, sick and pleading for help. Fear tugged at him, but so did something else, a strange, undeniable pull. They were not just animals. They were intelligent, aware, and vulnerable. I need to think, Kale whispered. But even as he spoke, he realized he already knew the answer. He could not ignore their plea. The dragon nodded, as if understanding his hesitation. Time is short. The illness spreads quickly. Every day we delay, more of us suffer. Kale looked at the herd. Some dragons lay on the ground, trembling slightly, their wings drooping. Others tried to stand, but their strength was fading. A deep ache of empathy rose within him. He had never felt this close to any creature, human or otherwise. I will help, he said finally. His voice was steady now, filled with determination. Tell me what I need to do. The blue-scaled dragon lowered its head further, nearly touching Kale's shoulder. The herb you seek grows at the edge of the silverwood forest. It blooms only under the first light of dawn. You must bring it to us quickly. The path is dangerous for your kind, but it is safer than for us. Kale nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. He had hiked through forests and cliffs many times, but never anything like this. His fingers itched to prepare, to gather ropes, tools, and supplies. Yet there was no time. Every moment mattered. Follow me, the dragon said. Without waiting for further questions, it took to the air, landing a short distance away, urging Kale to come. He ran toward the dragon, careful to keep his distance, and felt the ground tremble with each massive step the creatures took. The other dragons moved around him, silent but watchful, their eyes never leaving him. As Kale followed them, he noticed details he had never seen before. The way their scales reflected the sunlight, the rhythm of their breathing, the subtle way their tails balanced their enormous bodies. He felt both awe and fear, but the awe was stronger. These were not beasts. They were majestic beings, proud and intelligent, and they were trusting him. The path to Silverwood was not far, but it was treacherous. Loose stones and narrow ledges could have killed him if he misstepped. He watched as the dragons navigated easily, their claws gripping the earth, wings brushing against rocks for balance. Kale realized he would need to rely on their guidance, even if he could not match their strength. One dragon, smaller than the rest, walked beside him, nudging him gently with its snout as if offering reassurance. Kale smiled nervously. Thanks, he murmured. The dragon tilted its head and blinked slowly, a gesture Kale took as encouragement. As they reached the edge of the forest, Kale paused. Mist curled around the trees, and the first rays of sunlight peeked through the canopy, illuminating the path ahead. Somewhere within the forest, the herb waited, delicate and rare. The thought of finding it filled Kale with both excitement and dread. Stay close, Zoran whispered in his mind. You are not alone. We will guide you, but the courage must come from you. Kale took a deep breath, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. He had never imagined a day like this, standing at the edge of a forest with dragons, tasked with saving their herd. His heart pounded not just with fear but with the thrill of the unknown. And for the first time, Kale felt a strange certainty. Something about this moment, about these creatures, told him that his life would never be the same again. Whatever lay ahead in Silverwood, whatever dangers or surprises awaited, he knew one thing. He would face it not just as a human but as a friend to dragons. The dragons stirred, wings stretching, tails flicking as if sensing Kale's resolve. With a final glance at him, Zoran stepped forward, leading the way into the misty forest. Kale followed, heart racing, knowing the adventure of a lifetime had just begun. The sky above shimmered with scales and sunlight, a strange, magical promise. And Kale, the ordinary boy, was about to do something extraordinary. Kale moved carefully through the misty forest, the soft ground muffling his footsteps. Around him, the dragons navigated easily, their claws gripping roots and rocks without hesitation. Zoran, the blue-scaled leader, kept close, watching Kale with an intensity that made him feel both nervous and supported. The path to the rare herb was not just about distance. It was about understanding, patience, and trust. Kale realized that if he was going to succeed he had to earn it, not just from the dragons but from himself. As they walked, Kale tried to speak to the dragons, though he still felt awkward. "How did your herd get sick?" he asked, keeping his voice low. The voice echoed in his mind, calm and sad. A strange wind carried an illness from a distant land. It weakened us quickly and our bodies could not fight it alone. Only the herb from your forest can restore our strength. Kale shivered, imagining the dragons struggling to breathe, their wings drooping under the weight of sickness. His heart tightened. "I will get it," he said quietly. "I promise." One of the smaller dragons, a bright green one with golden eyes, sidled closer and nudged him gently. Kale laughed nervously. "I guess you want to help too?" The dragon blinked slowly, then curled its tail around a nearby root, watching him intently. The forest grew thicker as they moved deeper. Mist clung to the trees and strange sounds echoed around them. Distant calls of birds, the rustle of unseen creatures, the soft hum of wind through leaves. Kale's nerves tightened with each step, but the dragons never faltered. They paused occasionally, looking back at him, silently reminding him that he was not alone. At one point, Kale stumbled over a hidden root and fell onto his hands. Pain shot through his leg and he gritted his teeth. Before he could get up, the green dragon nudged him gently again, then lowered its head, letting Kale feel the warmth of its breath. It was a small gesture, but it made Kale feel understood. For the first time he sensed that the dragons were not just creatures to fear, they could be friends. "I think I can trust you," Kale said, more to himself than to the dragon. "And maybe, you can trust me too." The forest opened into a small clearing bathed in sunlight. Kale's eyes widened. There, growing along a small stream, was the herb the dragons had described. Its leaves glowed faintly in the sunlight, delicate and pure. Relief surged through Kale, but he also felt a new challenge. Retrieving the herb required climbing slippery rocks and crossing the stream, and one wrong step could send him tumbling. Zoran spoke in his mind again. "You must take it carefully. We will guide you, but your courage must carry you." Kale nodded and approached the stream. He felt the cold water rushing around his boots and the uneven stones beneath his feet. As he carefully stepped across, the green dragon followed closely, nudging stones with its snout to help him find steady footing. Kale laughed despite the tension. "I never thought a dragon would be my guide," he said. Once on the far side, Kale began to gather the herb. Its scent was fresh and slightly sweet. He plucked the leaves gently, making sure not to damage the plants. As he worked, he noticed Zoran watching him with what seemed like pride. The older dragon's presence was calm and reassuring, a silent encouragement. "This is amazing," Kale whispered. "I never thought I'd be friends with dragons, let alone help them." "They are capable of understanding more than you realize," Zoran replied in his mind. "And so are you. Trust is not given lightly, Kale. It is earned as you have done today." Kale felt a warmth in his chest. He had never thought of himself as brave or special. But here, in the company of dragons, he realized that courage could take many forms: patience, care, and the willingness to face something unknown. As he gathered the last of the herb, a sudden gust of wind rattled the trees. Kale froze, fearing that the storm might knock him off balance. But the dragons responded immediately. Zoran spread his wings and landed close, shielding Kale from falling branches. The green dragon wrapped its tail around him like a steadying hand. Kale laughed nervously, realizing that he could depend on them as much as they depended on him. By the time Kale had collected enough herb, the sun had risen higher, and the mist began to lift. The forest seemed less threatening now, almost welcoming. The dragons moved around him, playful and gentle, their eyes reflecting gratitude and relief. For the first time, Kale felt he truly belonged, not as a human alone but as part of a team that bridged two worlds. "You have done well," Zoran said in his mind. "Not because you found the herb but because you showed understanding, patience and trust. These are what make a human capable of greatness." Kale smiled. He felt proud but more importantly he felt connected. The dragons were no longer just creatures he helped, they were friends who believed in him. The bond they had formed was strong, built on respect and shared effort, and Kale knew it would last long after the herb healed the herd. As they turned to leave the clearing, the green dragon nudged him one last time and Kale laughed. All right, I get it. We're a team." Zoran watched him with a quiet approval. The herd moved together, wings brushing against each other in a display of unity. Kale walked alongside them, carrying the precious herb, feeling lighter than he had in years. He realized that trust was a bridge, between humans and dragons, between fear and courage, between the ordinary and the extraordinary. The journey back to the herd would be long, but Kale no longer felt afraid. With the dragons by his side he knew he could face anything. And for the first time he understood something deeper. Helping others, no matter how different they were, was the truest measure of strength. The forest faded behind them as they stepped into the open, the herd moving gracefully, their scales shimmering in the sunlight. Kale took a deep breath, feeling the bond he had built settle into his heart. The dragons trusted him and he trusted them. Together they would face whatever came next, united by courage, understanding and a friendship that no one could break. Kale led the dragons through the narrow paths of the forest, the herb carefully packed in a small satchel he carried. The sunlight filtered through the leaves, creating patterns on the forest floor. For a moment, everything seemed peaceful. But Kale knew the hardest part of the journey was still ahead. The herb had grown in a cliffside meadow high above the trees and reaching it would be dangerous. The dragons could fly effortlessly, but Kale was only human. As they approached the cliffs, Kale felt a knot of fear in his stomach. The rocks were steep, jagged and slick with moss. One slip could send him tumbling. He glanced at the dragons who moved easily over the terrain, their wings brushing against rocks for balance. Zoran stayed close, his eyes calm but watchful, guiding Kale silently through the treacherous path. Kale took a deep breath and began to climb. His hands gripped rough stone, and his feet searched for stable footholds. The wind whipped against him, making the climb harder. His arms burned and his legs trembled, but he refused to stop. The dragons watched silently, giving him space, yet he could feel their presence like a shield around him. Halfway up the cliff, Kale paused to rest. He looked down and felt dizzy. The forest below looked far away, smaller than a model in a child's play. The dragons hovered nearby, their wings steady, their eyes encouraging him. He closed his eyes for a moment and remembered why he had started this journey. The herd depended on him. They trusted him and he could not let them down. With renewed determination, Kale continued. One hand, then the other, gripping the rough edges, pulling himself upward. His heart pounded, but he focused on the rhythm of his movements. Step by step he climbed, each motion deliberate. The dragons followed him, their wings occasionally brushing the cliffside to steady themselves, a silent reminder that he was not alone. At one point, Kale slipped slightly on a loose stone. He gasped as he caught himself on a jagged edge. Panic rose, but the green dragon swooped closer, nudging a large rock below him with its snout, creating a small stable platform. Kale laughed nervously. "Thanks," he muttered, gripping the rock and carefully continuing his climb. The dragon's quiet support gave him courage he never knew he had. Finally, after what felt like hours, Kale reached the top. The cliff opened into a small meadow bathed in sunlight. The herb grew in clusters, its glowing leaves swaying gently in the breeze. Relief washed over him. He knelt and began to gather the plants carefully, making sure to collect enough without damaging the roots. The dragons watched patiently, their eyes soft with hope and trust. Kale worked quickly but carefully, aware of the delicate balance required. The wind gusted again, stronger this time, rattling the leaves of the herb. Kale held the plants close to his chest, crouching low to stay stable. Zoran hovered nearby, wings extended, ready to shield him if the wind became too strong. The green dragon stayed by his side, tail brushing the ground, a steady presence that reminded him to keep going. Once Kale had gathered enough, he looked around the meadow. From here, the view stretched far into the horizon, the forest below, the mountains beyond, and the sun casting golden light across the cliffs. He felt a mix of exhaustion and awe. The climb had been dangerous, but he had made it. And he had done it not alone, but with the dragon's quiet guidance. He carefully made his way to the edge of the cliff to descend. The path down was even more difficult, with narrow ledges and slippery rocks. Kale moved slowly, testing each foothold before shifting his weight. The dragons followed, occasionally nudging stones to stabilize the path or using their wings to block sudden gusts of wind. Kale realized that the challenge was not just physical. It was about trust, teamwork, and perseverance. As he neared the bottom, Kale felt a sudden surge of wind. A rock beneath his foot shifted and he stumbled. For a heart-stopping moment, he teetered on the edge. But the dragons reacted immediately. Zoran swooped down, catching Kale with a gentle nudge of his wing, while the green dragon pressed close, its tail wrapped around a nearby rock. Kale steadied himself and laughed, shaking his head. "I guess I really need you guys," he said, heart still racing. Once he reached solid ground, the dragons seemed to relax. Kale looked at them, feeling gratitude and pride. They had trusted him to navigate the cliffs and gather the herb, and he had succeeded. He realized that the challenge had tested more than his strength. It had tested his courage, patience, and determination. And he had passed, not alone, but with the dragons beside him. The herd waited nearby, their eyes hopeful as Kale approached. He held the herb carefully, presenting it to Zoran. The older dragon lowered his head, touching Kale's shoulder gently with his snout in a gesture of respect and gratitude. The other dragons stepped forward, their tails flicking and wings brushing softly against each other in quiet celebration. Kale smiled, feeling a deep connection to these creatures. They were not just dependent on him, they had become his companions, his friends. He realized that true strength was not about size or power, but about trust, courage, and the willingness to face challenges together. Zoran spoke in Kale's mind again. "You have faced the challenge bravely, Kale. You have proven that humans can rise to meet great trials. We are grateful, and our bond with you has begun." Kale felt warmth in his chest. He had started this journey unsure, afraid, and overwhelmed. But now, standing at the base of the cliff, surrounded by dragons who trusted him, he understood something profound. Courage was not the absence of fear, but the choice to move forward despite it. The dragons turned, ready to follow him back toward the herd. Kale adjusted the satchel of herb on his shoulder and walked alongside them, feeling lighter than he had in weeks. The cliffs that had seemed impossible now felt like a memory, a reminder of what could be achieved when trust and determination guided every step. As they moved together through the forest, Kale knew that greater challenges might await. But he also knew he would not face them alone. The bond he had formed with the dragons during this climb was unbreakable, built on shared struggle, understanding, and respect. And it was a bond that would carry them all forward, toward whatever the future held. The sunlight shifted through the trees, illuminating the path back to the herd. Kale walked steadily, side by side with dragons, feeling a sense of purpose he had never known. The challenge had tested him, but it had also shown him his true potential. And as he glanced at Zoran and the green dragon, he knew that together they could overcome anything. Kale carried the herb carefully as he followed the dragons back to their herd. The path was less treacherous now, but his steps were still careful, knowing that even a small mistake could harm him or the plants. The dragons moved gracefully beside him, wings brushing lightly against the trees, tails flicking in quiet rhythm. Kale had grown used to their presence, and a strange comfort filled him. He was no longer just a human boy in a forest, he was part of something bigger, something extraordinary. As they reached the edge of a sunlit clearing, Kale saw the herd waiting. Some dragons lay quietly, their scales dull and wings folded weakly. Others tried to stand, but their movements were sluggish. Kale's heart ached at the sight. He had never felt such responsibility before. The herb in his hands could change everything for them. He approached the nearest dragon, a silver-scaled one that trembled as he knelt beside it. Carefully he placed the herb leaves near its mouth. The dragon sniffed, then ate, slowly at first and then with more eagerness. Kale watched, holding his breath. The creature's golden eyes brightened, its scales glinting faintly in the sunlight. Relief surged through him. One by one, Kale offered the herb to the other dragons. Some were too weak to move initially, so he gently guided the leaves to their mouths. The herd began to respond almost immediately. Their wings stretched, scales shimmered, and the tremors in their bodies lessened. The small gestures of recovery filled the clearing with a quiet energy. Kale smiled, feeling pride and wonder. Zoran approached him, lowering his head so Kale could see the deep glow in his eyes. "You have done more than we could have hoped," the dragon said in Kale's mind. "But there is something you must understand. Our bond with humans is older than your history remembers. Your courage has awakened a connection that was nearly lost." Kale frowned. "A connection? What do you mean?" Zoran lowered his wings, settling beside him. "Long ago, humans and dragons lived in harmony. We shared knowledge, protected each other, and celebrated life together. Over time, fear and misunderstanding grew, and that connection faded. Your actions today remind us that humans can be allies once again." Kale's heart beat faster. He had never imagined that helping a herd of dragons could reach so far into history. I didn't know," he said quietly. "I just wanted to help." "And that is enough," Zoran replied. "Courage without selfishness is powerful. You have proven that trust and kindness are stronger than fear and doubt." The green dragon, who had been following Kale closely throughout the journey, nudged him gently with its snout. Kale laughed softly. "I guess I made a few friends along the way, huh?" The dragon blinked slowly, tail curling around him protectively, and Kale felt a warmth spread through his chest. The herd, now recovering, began moving around more energetically. Young dragons leapt and flapped their wings, while older ones walked steadily, regaining their strength. Kale watched, realizing that the herb had not just healed their bodies, it had reignited hope. The dragons seemed lighter, freer, as if the burden of illness had never been there. Zoran spoke again. "There is more, Kale. The bond we share is not just about this herd. Your courage has the power to inspire others, humans and dragons alike. There are those who will see what you have done and remember that cooperation is possible. That is the true gift you bring." Kale looked around at the herd, now moving gracefully under the sunlight, their scales gleaming, eyes bright, and tails swishing in contentment. He felt a strange sense of pride, not for himself alone, but for the world they could create together. "I never thought I could make such a difference," he admitted. "You have," Zoran said softly. "By acting with courage and compassion, you have reminded all of us that one small choice can ripple far beyond what you see. Your actions will be remembered, not just in our herd, but wherever humans and dragons meet again." Kale knelt beside one of the young dragons, letting it nuzzle him gently. He smiled, realizing that the bond they shared was mutual. The dragons trusted him and he trusted them. This was more than friendship. It was connection on a deeper level, something rare and precious. The green dragon hopped onto a rock beside Kale, watching the others with a quiet alertness. Kale laughed softly. "You really are something else," he said. The dragon blinked and nudged him, a small but clear gesture of recognition and approval. 4 hours, Kale stayed with the herd, helping where he could, observing the dragon's recovery. He learned their songs, soft sounds that seemed to carry healing energy, and marveled at how they communicated without words. He realized that understanding another being, truly understanding, required patience, observation, and respect. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the clearing, Zoran approached Kale once more. "You have done well today, Kale. Your courage has healed more than our bodies. It has healed trust and it has rekindled hope." Kale smiled, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. He had set out unsure of his abilities, afraid of the unknown, but he had discovered strength he never knew he had. The dragons had trusted him, guided him, and accepted him. In return, he had given them care, effort, and courage. Together they had achieved something remarkable. The herd began to settle for the evening, curling around each other in comfort. Kale stood, looking at the dragons, and felt a profound connection to them. He had helped save their herd, but he had also discovered the power of understanding and trust, something that went beyond fear, beyond history, and beyond what he had imagined possible. Zoran lowered his head close to Kale's shoulder, the warmth of his presence comforting. "Remember this day," the dragon said. "Not as a memory of what happened, but as a promise of what can be achieved when courage and compassion guide your actions. You are part of something greater now, Kale. Never forget that." Kale nodded, feeling the weight and wonder of the moment. He knew his life had changed forever. The dragons were no longer distant creatures of myth, they were friends, allies, and a living reminder of what could happen when fear was replaced by trust. As night fell, the clearing was bathed in silver moonlight, the dragons resting peacefully. Kale sat among them, feeling a calm he had never known. The journey had tested him, challenged him, and ultimately connected him to a world he had only dreamed of. The bond they shared was surprising, powerful, and real. And Kale knew that whatever challenges came next, he would face them together with his new friends. For the first time, Kale understood that true connection could heal, inspire, and change the course of history. And in that quiet forest clearing, surrounded by dragons glowing under the moonlight, he felt hope, for the herd, for humanity, and for the bond that now united them. Kale watched as the dragons recovered fully, their scales shining brighter than ever in the morning sunlight. The herd moved gracefully now, wings stretching and tails flicking, their energy renewed. Kale felt a warm sense of pride but also a quiet awe. He had helped them, but in return they had shown him a world he had never known, a world of courage, trust, and connection. Zoran landed beside him, eyes glowing softly. "You have done more than heal our bodies, Kale. You have reminded us that humans can be allies, friends, and protectors. That bond is more precious than any herb or spell." Kale smiled. "I never expected this, to be part of something so big." "Big is not the right word," Zoran said, tilting his head. "This is important. The world will remember what has begun here." Kale looked at the herd, some dragons playfully nudging each other, others resting quietly, their eyes bright and calm. He realized the herd was not just a group of creatures. They were a family, connected in ways humans rarely understood. And now he was part of that family too. The green dragon hopped closer, nudging Kale's shoulder with a playful flick of its snout. Kale laughed softly. "I guess you've accepted me completely." The dragon blinked slowly, tail curling around Kale's feet, a gesture of trust and warmth. News of Kale's deeds traveled quickly through nearby villages. At first, humans were wary, unsure of what to make of dragons so close. But Kale returned with the herd slowly, demonstrating their gentle nature and willingness to cooperate. He showed how the dragons could carry heavy loads, assist in building, and even help in tending the forests. People began to see them not as threats but as allies. Kale found himself at the center of this new era. He guided interactions between humans and dragons, explaining how trust and care could benefit both sides. The dragons learned quickly, observing humans, listening, and even communicating in ways that became easier over time. Kale marveled at how two very different species could come together through understanding and patience. One day, Zoran took Kale to the edge of the cliffs where they had first met. The view stretched far beyond the village, the forest, and the mountains. Dragons soared through the sky, playful and free, while humans below watched in wonder. "Look at what we have created together," Zoran said. "A world where fear does not rule. Where humans and dragons can thrive side by side." Kale nodded, feeling the truth of the dragon's words deep in his chest. He had started this journey unsure of himself, afraid of the unknown, but now he understood that courage, kindness, and trust could change everything. Even the smallest acts could ripple out and shape the future. The herd moved closer and Kale knelt among them, letting the young dragons nuzzle him. Their warmth and gentle sounds filled him with joy. He had never felt so connected, so accepted. The dragons were no longer distant legends. They were real and they were friends. In the village, humans began to learn from Kale. They observed how the dragons helped care for the land, how they protected the forests, and how their presence encouraged cooperation. Children laughed as young dragons played nearby, learning from one another in a way humans and dragons had never done before. Kale watched these interactions and realized that the future he had only dreamed of was beginning now. Even the elders, once wary and fearful, began to see the benefits. They marveled at the dragon's intelligence, their gentle strength, and their willingness to assist. Kale explained that trust had been the key, the willingness to face fear, to understand, and to act with care. Slowly, old prejudices faded, replaced by curiosity and respect. Kale spent his days guiding both humans and dragons, helping them understand each other. He learned their songs, soft vibrations that carried subtle meanings, and taught humans to listen. He discovered that the dragons had knowledge of herbs, lands, and skies that humans had never known. And the humans, in turn, shared tools, ideas, and stories that fascinated the dragons. Through these exchanges, Kale realized that the bond he had formed was more than friendship. It was a bridge between worlds, a promise that cooperation and understanding could achieve what fear and isolation never could. He thought of the first day he had met Zoran in the herd, how uncertain and afraid he had been, and marveled at how far he had come. As months passed, the relationship between humans and dragons grew stronger. Villages flourished with the help of dragons carrying supplies and aiding in construction. Forests were cared for more carefully, as dragons taught humans which plants were important for the land. The world slowly began to change, shaped by trust, courage, and compassion. One evening, Kale stood on the cliffs, watching the sunset. Dragons soared overhead, their scales catching the last rays of light. Below, humans moved about their work, unafraid and curious. He felt a sense of peace he had never known. The herd had healed, humans had learned, and he had discovered that one act of kindness could spark an era of change. Zoran landed beside him, eyes reflecting the golden light. You have started something important, Kale. Not just for us but for your kind as well. Remember that your courage made this possible. Kale smiled, feeling both humble and proud. I never thought I could make a difference, he said softly. You did, Zoran replied. And your story will inspire others. Courage, trust, and kindness, they are the true strength of humans. You have reminded us of that, and now the world will remember too. Kale looked at the dragons, then at the horizon, and realized he had been part of something extraordinary. The world was no longer divided by fear and doubt. Humans and dragons could coexist, learn from one another, and protect each other. And it had all begun because he had chosen to act, to trust, and to help. As night fell, Kale sat among the herd, feeling their warmth and gentle hums around him. Stars appeared overhead, mirrored by the glimmering scales of the dragons. He thought of the journey he had taken, the cliffs, the herb, the fear and the trust, and smiled. He had faced challenges, formed bonds, and witnessed the beginning of a new era. For the first time, Kale understood that the world could be shaped by courage and kindness. And as he watched the dragons settle around him, he knew that humans and dragons would face the future together, stronger, wiser, and united. The era of fear was over. The era of understanding had begun. Kale leaned back, gazing at the sky, feeling calm and hopeful. The dragons had healed, the village had changed, and he had grown. A new era had arrived, not with wars or battles but with friendship, trust, and the quiet power of one human boy willing to act. The world was different now, and Kale knew it would never be the same again.